and prevail in your fantasy football league with the help of our starting lineup. At host to quarterback the show, we have Nick Giacobbe. Up next, a dual threat in Dynasty and Daily Fantasy, we have Cody Repass. And finally, working the waiver wire, we have Nick Cap. These are your playmakers that will provide you with sleepers, breakouts, and busts to help you achieve fantasy glory. This is the PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast.
Welcome, everybody, to episode 9 of the PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast, where we give you our predictions, our picks, in the hopes that we help you prevail in Week 4 and throughout the entirety of the 2021 fantasy football season. I am your host, Nick Giacobbe. Joining me this week is Nick Capsalis. Nick, how are you doing this week?
Could be better, but it is what it is. We move on.
That's fantasy life. Normally, we are also joined by Cody Repass, but unfortunately, Cody did have a family thing he had to attend to. But don't worry, Cody will be back on Friday's show, and he'll also be back on Sunday's show for the live stream. So me and Nick are going to hold it down. We've been talking to each other for 15, 16 years of our life. So the show might be a little shorter, but the content will still be there. So if this is your first time listening, welcome. Thank you for checking us out. We hope that you check us out again on Fridays and on Sundays. You could find us on all your audio podcast platforms, whether it's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, or anywhere else where you get your podcasts. If you are on Apple, please give us a 5-star review and a rating, 5-star rating and a review. That actually does help us a lot. If you want to support us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, any kind of social media, you go to Twitter, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok is going to be PrimeTimeFFPod. Facebook's going to be PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast. YouTube will be PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast, and the YouTube is where you'll find the video version of the show. If you like watching the video, if you like looking at the fancy graphics, like looking at our handsome mugs, we get great faces for podcasting. That's where you'll find us on YouTube. As for Sundays, we do a live show 11 a.m. Eastern Time every Sunday on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. That's where we give you our daily fantasy best bargains. We give you an injury update at 11:30 Eastern Time when the injury news does come out for the 1 o'clock games. And the best part is we answer your questions. I do want to apologize. If you did send a question in on Twitter this week, we didn't get it. We don't know why. That's an issue with StreamYard, the service that we do use to do the video hosting. I believe StreamYard did switch from Periscope to Twitter because Periscope is dead. So they did switch from Periscope to Twitter. And I think there was an issue with the comments. We don't know why they didn't come in, but we're going to test that and get that fixed for Sunday. So if we're not getting questions in on the test, then please submit your questions on YouTube or Facebook, because we do want to help you out. We do want to answer your question, and we're never going to ignore a question. So we'll figure that part out. But again, we do want to help you any way we possibly can. Alrighty, Nick, how was your week 4? We're recording on Monday night. The show comes out on Tuesday. You're in 6 fantasy leagues. So how did you do this week for week 3?
I've got 2 wins locked up. I got one probable loss, and then I got 3 other games riding on this Eagles-Cowboys game. So right after this podcast, I'll be buckling down, and we'll see where we go from there. So we'll see what happens. But
what I've learned in my leagues is my teams are all average. I'm kind of middle of the pack. I'm sitting at 4 or 5 in most of my leagues. There's one league, which is actually my cheapest league money-wise, and I'm not doing well in that one so far. But that's okay. The big money ones are kind of what I got to focus on. And I like my rosters. It's not really a roster issue. It's not an injury issue. Bad matchups, players not performing, not worried about it. It's only week 3. So this week, it looks like I'm going possibly 2-2. Could be 0-4, could be 2-2. I definitely lost 2 of them. What I need tonight is Amari Cooper to get me 2 points in one league, in my big dynasty league. And in my other, in one of that small league that I just told you about, that I'm currently 0-2 in, I have 116 points. My opponent has 115. I have Amari Cooper. He has CeeDee Lamb. So we're big Cooper tonight in the Dallas Cowboys game. What's your biggest predicament tonight? What's the biggest thing that you need, or the biggest hurdle that you have to overcome?
I mean, the biggest hurdle for my season so far has been our league. I've allowed 400 points in week 1 and 2, and this week 198. So, I mean, I'm averaging a little over 50 points per game in the league, and it's still not coming through. But, the team's good. I mean, I got one league. Probably the toughest one I got is Jalen Hurts and Devontae Smith. I need them to combine for 40 more points than Greg Zuerlein. It's definitely achievable, but you definitely need that Hurts to Devontae Smith touchdown for it to become, a lot easier. So it's really going to ride on that for the game. Other than that, I mean, I got Dak, I got CD, I got Zeke, I got Cooper across all my leagues playing. So 6 players through tonight's game that I'm paying attention to.
I do want to give a quick shout out to my buddy Jake. I edged him out in week 1 in the Dynasty League, but unfortunately he did get some payback this week. He dropped a nice 196 on me, took a steamy one on my face. It was not pretty. I think I only put it 140 or something. I don't even remember. It was not good. So Jake, you got me there. I'll get you back later in the season. But that's it for us. Hopefully you guys did win your matchups, and hopefully we helped you guys win your matchups with those questions that we did answer on Sunday's show. So let's get into the injury updates. We don't like talking about injuries. They happen. It's going to be a thing every week. Apparently everybody's hamstrings are just falling off. That's the NFL for you. So we're going to start with Christian McCaffrey, and it's a hamstring. He's not going on the IR. He's expected to miss 2 to 4 weeks. So the opponents he could end up facing would be the Vikings in week 6 or the Giants in week 7. This is the second year that McCaffrey has been injured back to back. I don't remember McCaffrey's injury last year. Was it a hamstring?
It was a hamstring.
It was a hamstring. So yeah, that's a trend that you want to watch. So Nick, how worried are you about the number 1 overall pick in fantasy football in probably 85% of leagues?
I mean, you have to be. Look, this is the second year in a row he's dealing with this issue. We were told last year it would probably be 3 to 6 weeks, I believe it was initially.
And he missed 8 or something, close to 8.
Yeah, and I think it went 8 weeks. He played one more game, and then he was out for the rest of the year with the hamstring. So, I mean, it's absolutely something you have to be concerned with. It's not his first time dealing with the issue, with the injury, and the first time he dealt with it sidelined him for most of the season. He's your number 1 pick. You really do need McCaffrey in that lineup if he's the number 1 overall pick to probably carry your team. If you're in a 12-man league, you probably weren't able to get one of those top-tier second running backs. So your fantasy team really relies on him. So it's a big loss if you didn't get your handcuff. But, I mean, we'll talk about Chuba later.
Yeah, I think the big deal is that you spent a number 1 overall pick on Christian McCaffrey. That's a solid 25, 30 points in standard leagues. If you have bonuses, even more. That's a guy you're counting on every week. And then your wraparound, you're coming to pick number 20 and 21. So you don't have the players to really make up for that unless you struck gold with somebody. So you're kind of putting yourself in a hole. They're not putting yourself, but you're in a hole now with McCaffrey out. Luckily, it's only 3 to 6 weeks. It's not something season ending like my poor J.K. Dobbins in my Dynasty League. Yeah. But so, yeah, I mean, you just got to ride it out. Hopefully you have another running back. Hopefully you were smart and drafted a Javonte Williams who's edging into the offense, or even a Jamal Williams, or maybe a Kenyon Drake. Hopefully you drafted some Kareem Hunt or Trey Sermon. Hopefully there's somebody drafted as a running back 3 that you just slot in for a couple of weeks until McCaffrey does come back. But
just real quick, it actually is really funny because I'm in a league where I had the first overall pick, took CMC. Second round, I had Joe Mixon there, so I took him to double up, and my backups are Jamal Williams, Javonte Williams. So you could slot him in, but it's not CMC.
Yeah.
And I caught the bed break of dropping Chuba this week. We'll talk about that later too.
That is rough. And those opponents, the Vikings and the Giants, neither of them have been phenomenal defenses so far through the season. We'll know more when week 5 rolls around, but those are pretty favorable matchups for Christian McCaffrey, and the Panthers are rolling at the moment. AJ Brown, let's play Guess the Injury. It's another hamstring. AJ Brown, I think, played a couple snaps. I was watching the red zone. I don't remember exactly when he went out, but it looked like he only played a couple snaps. He's week to week at the moment, and he does have the ferocious, dominant, you don't want to play these guys, the New York Football Jets next week. So I think that AJ Brown should probably sit this one out. It's going to be a tough matchup for him. I don't think he should play. Probably not a good one against those Jets. So he could be out. But week to week means that we got to see the practice report. We're not going to know anything until Wednesday or Thursday. If he doesn't practice Wednesday, I won't be worried. But if he doesn't practice Thursday, I'll be a little worried. So, Nick, how concerned are you if you are an A.J. Brown owner, whether it's for this week or the entirety of the season?
I mean, look, it's a hamstring injury. We always see it sideline players and become a recurring issue for the season. It happened to Austin Eckler last year. It happened to McCaffrey last year. Like this is a problem. And he's a big athletic guy. I mean, he's not tiny. That he's putting a lot of weight on those legs, and that's not a good thing for your wide receiver 1. Maybe wide receiver 2 if you drafted one of those top tier guys. I mean, you have to be concerned. I mean, for anyone that owns that offense. I mean, even Julio struggled without AJ Brown on the field last week. So I mean, it's a whole concern. I mean, for all those key players outside, I think it's Derrick Henry on that team.
That team is so weird. I have Tannehill in one of my Yahoo leagues, and the one that I did, the lowest money league that I'm 0-2, and I have Tannehill as my quarterback. And I kept on getting alerts that he was scoring touchdowns. And I'm reading the names of the guys that were scoring these touchdowns. I got to pull up ESPN just to read them off because I didn't know anybody that was scoring touchdowns for Tennessee. It wasn't Julio Jones. Obviously, AJ Brown was out, but I was shocked at the guys that were that were scoring these touchdowns. So, but aside from that, AJ Brown has a super, super great matchup against the Jets. If he's good enough to go, and Tractorcito doesn't already put up a buck and 2 touchdowns by halftime, AJ Brown could have a pretty big day, and so could Julio. This could be a real get-right game for the Titans. The Titans obviously defeated my Seahawks last week, and they just defeated the Colts, so they don't need to get right to really win games, but I think these receivers need to start clicking with Tannehill because a lot of people, including myself, are very high on Ryan Tannehill going into the season. I put him as a dark horse MVP candidate. He's not playing like one at the moment. But this could be a get-right game for Julio and AJ Brown if they both end up playing. But they also may want to sit AJ Brown. I don't know if they're going to take the Jets lightly, but they look horrible. Yeah. I think they got shut out this week. Yeah. What, they scored 3 points against the Pats or something? The Jets, they're abysmal.
6 points against the Pats. Three. They're not moving the ball. The corners cannot shut down wide receivers.
And that's a problem for Corey Davis. That's a whole nother conversation to have. But Corey Davis right now, I have him. He's not playable right now. I need to see something for him to play him. Real quick. So these are the guys that caught touchdowns. Nick Westbrook Ikine, I don't know how to say his last name. Yeah. Ikine, he caught a touchdown. Jeremy McNichols caught a touchdown, 1 reception, 10 yards. And Chester Rogers, 1 reception, 6 yards. Those are Ryan Tannehill's 3 touchdown passes. So yeah, there you go. Okay, that's it for AJ Brown. We're moving on to James White. Hip injury. It's a similar injury to Fitzpatrick and Tua. I forget the actual name for it. Begins with S. Sub something.
It's a big word.
Yeah, big word that we don't need to use. We're not medical people. So it's the same kind of injury that both Tua and Fitzpatrick have. Fitzpatrick's obviously is more on the serious side. We don't know about Tua yet. So this is potentially a season ending for James White. We'll probably know more by Friday's show. But Nick, how does this affect that Patriots offense, or even how does it affect Damian Harris?
I mean, Harris definitely gets the uptick. I mean, Belichick still likes to rotate the running backs. I'm not really sure who took over when White went out. But I mean, Mac Jones didn't play particularly well in the game anyway. They didn't play too well against New Orleans, but they had the wide receivers, they were getting used a lot more. Tight ends didn't really benefit. We'll talk about them later, but I mean, it just feels like it's the ever rotating offense in New England. You know, it's what we got with Shanahan the first 3 weeks. It's what we get from Bill Belichick every year. So.
It's the 49ers, but worse. They're not. There's nobody fantasy playable. There's not an Edelman. There's not a Gronk. There's really nobody fantasy playable on the Patriots, except for Damian Harris. You could play, but aside from that, it's rough out there. Yeah. I think the Patriots need to make a trade. I think they need to call up the Houston Texans and call number 28, Rex Burkhead. I think it'd be a fantastic addition to the football team. He could catch the ball. He could run the ball. I think Rex Burkhead's the guy that the Patriots need to trade for. Nice. And if that happens, I will pick him up and I will play him against Nick in any possible
my kryptonite.
league.
My kryptonite.
All right. Juju Smith-Schuster has bruised ribs. He's considered day-to-day. I'm not too worried about this one since he's day-to-day. He's not on IR, nothing broken. I think Juju will play next week. Nick, are you worried about Juju, or is this something that just he'll be fine?
No, I'm not worried about Juju. The one thing I took away is when Juju went down, they didn't slot James Washington into his role. They slotted Chase Clay. Claypool is the guy that gets 5-6 targets a game and you hope for the deep bomb. He went 9 for 96. That's not the typical Chase Claypool game. So, I mean that for me, I'm happier as a Claypool owner knowing that that's the role that he's getting. He's not getting, the big hope for the big shot. He's getting the slant routes. He's getting those short 10-yard plays with Big Ben, which fits his style right now. So, I mean, I'm more happy as a Claypool owner than anything. That's the news I took away.
Yeah, and they have the Packers on Sunday 425. The Packers have given up a lot of yards to the Saints, the Lions, and the 49ers. Their defense is not very good. But the Steelers' offense, I don't really know what to make of them. I mean, great game for Najee Harris. We're going to talk about him in a few. Deontay Johnson gets like 10 targets a game as long as he could play next week. Claypool and Juju also get their targets, but Big Ben really can't throw. He doesn't have an arm, so I don't know what to make of this offense. But if I'm Pittsburgh, go get Deshaun Watson. Like, do whatever you got to do. I don't care if you got to trade 5. It's not even possible. You can't trade 5 first-round picks, and no team would ever do it. But if you could get Deshaun Watson for like 3 firsts, 2 seconds, and like, I don't know. I mean, they wouldn't want Big Ben anyway, but whoever, like, go get Deshaun Watson, because you slot Deshaun Watson into that team, they're a Super Bowl contender.
Oh, absolutely.
The offense is good enough. The line is shaky. It's not great, but Deshaun Watson's been behind the Texans line his whole career, and he's put up 3,800 yards and 30 touchdowns. So you put him behind on that offense with that defense, Deshaun Watson's going to be – he could be an MVP caliber player. I'll say it. Deshaun Watson could win an MVP if he suited up for the Steelers. It'd be tough on 1 week's notice to learn that playbook. So I don't want to say that. But if he started for the Steelers, trade this week, right? This moment. Starts for the Steelers next week against Denver, where has a good defense. You give him what? That's 12 weeks. Deshaun Watson will be a top 3 MVP candidate by the end of the season. But that's another conversation to have. KJ Hamler tore his ACL. Speaking of the Broncos, he's now out for the year. I mean, the impact on the Broncos for me is that Tim Patrick just boosts up that waiver wire, who's already a waiver target. The Broncos are thin at wide receiver. They're going to have to lean on Cortland Sutton more, who had a bad game. Lean on Tim Patrick. Lean on Noah Fant, and maybe just run the ball a little bit more. Their defense is phenomenal. They have a top. Maybe it's tough to say after 3 weeks, but the Broncos pretty much have a top 5 defense at the moment. They look really, really good. They shut down 3 not so great teams. So we need to see what they do against a team like Kansas City, but they look pretty good at the moment. So maybe they just start running the ball and free Javonte Williams, and Teddy B just kind of gets some of that pressure off of his shoulders. So Nick, what do you make about KJ Hamler's injury? I know he's probably not on a lot of fantasy rosters anyway, but how does this affect that Denver offense as a whole?
Yeah, I mean, Hamler shouldn't have been owned in most leagues anyway, but he was the burner that really opened up the field for Bridgewater. You know, he's a speed guy. You got to put someone fast on him. You got to have someone over the top keeping his eye on him. So, I mean, it's a miss for the offense. And when you're going into Pittsburgh next week, I'm concerned about, you know, if I have Tim Patrick, if I have Cortland Sutton, that's someone I'm more debating, you know, versus when they were playing the Jets and when they were playing the Giants. And I think it was Jacksonville, the other game. Like that's their 3 matchups. It's 3 easy defenses. Pittsburgh's still top 5 defense, top 7 defense in the league. That they know how to get the job done there. So, I mean, it's absolutely a concern when they get to these tougher games and in that division that they're not going to space the field out as well. So I keep a close eye on the actual game performance versus the fantasy production of the players over the next 2 weeks and see how they choose to, you know, adapt without having that in the field.
Yeah. Last injury, we're not going to talk about this much because it's not very relevant. Scotty Miller, toe injury, is going to miss significant time. I don't think it matters. I mean, he shouldn't be fantasy rostered. There's too many mouths to feed on that offense. But just in case for daily fantasy purposes, if Antonio Brown does miss the next game, you will not have Scotty Miller available. Nick, I don't know if you have anything to say, but there's just not much to say.
Yep.
All righty, moving on to segment 2, happier news, or could be. Josh Gordon is back in the league. He just keeps coming and coming and coming. It's like the Simpsons meme when Mo throws out Barney out of the bar. Mo wipes his hands and there's Barney Gumble right behind him. Somebody should make that meme and send it to us on Twitter and we'll give it a retweet. So how many teams has Josh Gordon been on now in the last 5 years? He's been on the Browns, Seattle, Patriots. Is that it? I don't know if he's been on another one. I think that's it.
I feel like that's it. But
he's been suspended. What is it? 8 times. Man, what's the record for most suspensions as an NFL player? Man, give that guy a banner. Hang the banner in whatever stadium he's playing. Just 8 times. That's a lot. Seattle was going to bring him back, and I wish that they did. I don't know what happened there, but it seems like Kansas City is scooping him. He was last on Seattle. He got suspended before their playoff game. In his last season, he had 427 yards, 1 touchdown in 11 games in 2019. That's combined with the Seahawks and the New England Patriots. So, Nick, what's the fantasy impact of Josh Gordon coming back into the NFL?
I mean, Gordon, he's a talented football player, but Kansas City, they got an elite offense, obviously. They got Patrick Mahomes. It's a great team. It's a great situation for him. But I'm always still concerned with Kansas City because that Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce are 1A, 1B on that team. And whoever the third benefactor is always rotates game to game. Some weeks it's Hardman, some weeks it's Pringle, some weeks it's Clyde. I mean, Williams slides in there every now and then, gets a touchdown. I really don't know how to gauge Josh Gordon right now. And I mean, the guy's extremely talented. You don't know if he's going to make it through the entire season. I'd say he probably won't as much as you hope that he would.
What's your over under on games? If I said to you, I'll give you $100 if you hit the number. Well, what's your over under on games that Josh Gordon actually plays this year?
I mean, maybe he gets to week 10, you get 2.5 months out of him. But I mean, I don't know how much you really want to rely on that. And even if he is in there, I mean, even if he played, let's assume Josh Gordon played rest of season, right? Let's assume he doesn't get suspended for the entire year. I don't know if I'd still feel confident enough playing him on a week-to-week basis over someone, he's really replacing McCole Hardman or Sammy Watkins from last year's role.
Who aren't rostered anyway. You're not rostering Hardman or
Hardman you might have in a deeper league, but Sammy Watkins last year wasn't really owned. I mean, Hardman you're probably not playing unless you needed that massive upside on a Monday night and you hope he gets the deep bomb. I mean, so I really don't see as much fantasy production as people are hyping up about Josh Gordon. He's someone I'm probably not picking up. I think there's better options that we'll talk about later on the waiver wire than Josh Gordon. But the guy's talented. Like, he's a talented player at the end of the day. So I just don't see the fantasy impact that he'll have.
He's got to take Stephen A's advice. So stay off the weed. I actually hope he does because he's clearly gone through a lot. So hopefully he does fix himself and make some kind of return and can be fantasy relevant again, but I'm not picking him up either. All right, let's go to a weekly wrap. We're going to talk about some of the biggest studs and duds from week 3. Let's start off with the quarterbacks. Quarterback 1, my quarterback 1 on the season, Josh Allen, 37.2 fantasy points. Justin Herbert finally showed up for all those managers that took him as a top 5 quarterback. Quarterback 2 on the week, 30.8 points. Huge win against those Kansas City Chiefs, who have Super Bowl hangover. I said it was coming. Everybody said to me the Chiefs are too good, but Super Bowl hangover. And quarterback 5, Sam Darnold, USC guy, fight on. I've been a Sam guy. I might have kind of trashed him a bit on the Jets. Well earned. Like, he wasn't great on the Jets. Maybe it's a Gase thing, but I'm happy for Sam Darnold, quarterback 5, 25.26 fantasy points. So, Nick, who was your biggest fantasy stud with the quarterbacks this week, whether it was any of these 3 guys or somebody else?
I mean, all 3 have good stuff to talk about. Mine's going to be Josh Allen, but it's a little more pessimistic. He had the massive week. We know that's his upside. His wide receivers got immensely evolved in the offense. Emmanuel Sanders, Cole Beasley leading the charge. Dawson Knox had a good game. I felt like everything just went so well for Buffalo, and Josh Allen hit his ceiling, and he hit the 2 low games early on, and he's only the quarterback 6, I think, on the season. And this is before Dak Prescott and Jalen Hurts play, who are average. Or Dak had a rough game last week, but Jalen Hurts is averaging close to 30 points per game. So this is my problem with Josh Allen. With
Josh is 5, by the way. I just checked.
Yeah. So he's 5 right now. So this was the problem where you're going to need a lot of these games for Josh Allen to deliver on the second drafted quarterback in fantasy football. And he got the game. Good for him. He's got to keep this production up. Like, this is the number that he needs to hit. Like 30 plus per week to finish as a top 2-3 quarterback after those weeks of struggle. I mean, Josh Allen, obviously, he's a top 7-8 quarterback in the league, depending on who you ask. But
probably top 5, probably closer, top 5.
Yeah, we could have another debate about that one, but that's where his benchmark is, and this is what he needs to consistently do. But you saw a big game from Zach Moss. You saw Emmanuel Sanders evolve. They found a way to get the ball down the field without Diggs, which I think is the bigger story out of Buffalo. That's the way that they're going to win games. That's the way they're going to be productive. And that's the way Josh Allen finishes as a top 3, top 4 quarterback. Can he consistently do that? I have my doubts, but I mean, this is a good starting point.
He's going to make you eat your words. They have a good receiving core. Cole Beasley, Emmanuel Sanders are showing up. I still love Gabriel Davis, even though he's droppable in every league. Maybe even Dynasty is probably droppable. But and Dawson Knox gets involved. He's spreading the ball around. It's not just the Stephon Diggs show, like you said. So Josh is on the right track with that. I would love to talk about Herbert. He doubled his fantasy points. He was averaging 15. He doubled it to 30. I would love to find out what his schedule is. I don't have it pulled up, though.
I'll pull it up right
but
now.
I'm going to talk about Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold right now is the quarterback 11. His points are 19, 18, and 25. The touchdowns weren't there in how did he score 20? Did he have 2 rushing touchdowns? He must have.
Darnold, I think he had 1.
How did he score 25? Because he didn't pass for 1 touchdown here. I wonder how.
Maybe he did get a second. I think he only had 1, but I'll double check for you.
Yeah,
right
can you
now.
double check that one for me? But Sam Darnold now, he's close to 20 fantasy points a week. He's the quarterback 11. He's a guy you actually got to consider now, and he's spreading the ball around. He's giving DJ Moore his targets. I think Terrence Marshall had 5 or 6 targets. Robbie Anderson was there with him with the Jets, and with McCaffrey out, I think Darnold's going to have to carry a bit more of the load. He's going to have to pass more. He's probably going to end up passing for 250, 300 yards a game. Am I trusting Sam Darnold to start for my fantasy team? No. Am I trusting him as a backup on my roster if I didn't draft a second quarterback? It's possible. I drafted Trevor Lawrence in my league, and you know where Trevor Lawrence is right now? He's on the waiver wire, because guess what? Trevor Lawrence isn't worth a roster spot right now unless you're in a dynasty league. Because Trevor Lawrence, let's see if I can pull up. I'm not going to try to find his name real quick. This is bad radio. Trevor Lawrence is the quarterback 29. There's 32 quarterbacks in the league. Trevor's has like 6 picks on the season right now. His points are 19 against Houston, 6 against Denver, 7 against Arizona, and his opponents now, he's got Cincy next week, who looks like they have a pretty decent defense. He has Miami in a couple weeks that have a good defense. He does have Tennessee, so we'll see how he does against Tennessee, but the rest of his schedule, Buffalo, Indianapolis, San Francisco, Arizona, the Rams. Trevor Lawrence shouldn't be on a fantasy roster. We're going to talk about that one, but right now, I'm taking Sam Darnold on a fantasy roster at this moment over Trevor Lawrence, and I'm happy for Sam. I really am. Fight on. And let's talk about the quarterbacks who are duds. Were you looking anything up? I don't want to cut you off.
Yeah, so real quick, Darnold did get his 2 touchdowns on the ground, and then Justin Herbert into week 4 gets the Raiders in primetime Monday Night Football.
There you go. The duds, Russell Wilson, quarterback 17, 16.2. Daniel Jones, the quarterback 18, 16.5. The 3 rookies were all duds. Trevor Lawrence, 7.46, quarterback 29. Justin Fields, quarterback 31 at 3.92. Zach Wilson, quarterback 32. No good. No good at all. And I do want to mention this one too. Kyler Murray, quarterback 15. He should be on this list too. I don't know why we don't have him. Quarterback 15 at 18 points. Not a great game for Kyler Murray. Also, Nick, who is your biggest dud of the week when it comes to these quarterbacks?
I mean, I told Nick this before. It's the rookie quarterbacks. Look, I said this last year with Joe Burrow and Herbert. Like that was an outlier year. In a typical fantasy year, a rookie quarterback does not deliver QB1 type numbers. It's not something that happens. It's very much an outlier. I mean, Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson, no excuses. 7 picks each through 3 weeks. Zero excuse for that there, even though they both played tougher defenses in the NFL. No excuses. Look, that's what you got. Justin Fields, Matt Nagy might be the worst head coach in football, and I think he should be fired this morning. Matt Nagy
reeks. Matt Nagy you could smell him from, if you're in New York, Florida, California, if you're in Mexico, Brazil, I don't care. Like, you could just smell his stench. He's like Pigpen walking around. Like, he's garbage. Matt Nagy should not have a job right now. That double doink a couple of years ago, like, that was it. That you dug his grave. He's been in the grave since that double doink.
Yeah, I'm gonna quote Dan Orlovsky on this. You had 149 days with Justin Fields to figure out how to get him to move the ball downfield, and you did absolutely nothing with it. You know what you did? You know what you did? You gave the quarterback 1 reps to Andy Dalton because you promised him the job in March. That's ridiculous.
You drafted a top 5 prospect, and because you promised Dalton the job, you didn't give him any first-team reps. That's stupid. That's pure stupidity out of Matt Nagy. He's a moron. I give Pete Carroll a lot of crap as a Seahawks fan, but Matt Nagy, God, Bears fans, I pray for you. He's the worst. And the issue that I have with the Bears right now, their offensive line is a bottom 5 line in the league, and that's a problem for everybody. It's a problem for David Montgomery, who looked pretty good against the Rams. I'll give him that. That's a problem for the receivers. Allen Robinson has only scored, I think, 10 fantasy points. That might be the most he's scored, and he's probably a guy you drafted in round 3. Yeah. Darnold Mooney, a breakout candidate for just about everybody, including myself. I think he only had 2 points on the week. I'm not worried about Mooney in Dynasty. I'm worried about him for this season because that line is terrible. Nagy does not know how to coach. He doesn't have an offensive mind, so he's not going to work with Justin Fields. They need somebody that can work with Justin Fields. That's a problem. So right now, those 3 rookie quarterbacks, they should not be on fantasy rosters. Unless you're in Dynasty, you can keep them. But on regular fantasy rosters with 20 roster spots, Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson, and Justin Fields, they're not on rosters. And Allen Robinson might be hitting the bench. Darnell Mooney is definitely on the bench. They got to show me something before I could personally start them. I mean, Montgomery I'll play because running back's so thin. But Nick, is Allen Robinson the guy that you're benching?
I mean, I can't because I just know how much of a workload he's supposed to get. But what's the point where you go to supposed to get? Like, they have the Lions this week who don't have a good defense. If I'm an Allen Robinson owner, I'm giving him 1 more week, and it depends how good your bench is. But if you have like JaMarr Chase, who's your wide receiver 4, or you have Jalen Waddle, I'm starting them over Allen Robinson. Maybe not this week against the Lions. Maybe I give him 1 more week. But if he puts another week under 10 points, I'm benching Allen Robinson. No, yeah, I mean that's absolutely fair. Look, you drafted the guy high and you want to play him, but you got to adapt. It's fantasy football.
Yeah.
Justin and look, I mean, I put 90% of the blame on Matt Nagy, but Justin Fields doesn't look like a good quarterback. He was drafted as the 4th overall quarterback in the class for a reason, has escaped outside the top 10.
Joe Burrow had a bottom 5 line last year when he was averaging like 20 fantasy points. I mean, unless he faced Pittsburgh, like it's not all about Russell Wilson's had an abysmal line for years. So has Deshaun Watson, like I just mentioned. Like, it's not all about the line. So it's bad, but
and look, it's not like Zach Wilson has an excuse. He has a bad offensive line, no run game, rookie head coach, rookie OC. One of the worst receiving corps in the league. Justin Fields has Allen Robinson, who's been productive with every quarterback in his career. He has a speedy wide receiver in Darnell Mooney who can get open downfield.
And David Montgomery finishes a top 5 fantasy running back.
Then I think you can argue James Robinson and obviously Michael Carter, Tevin Coleman, Ty Johnson. I mean, he's got Cole Kmet, who's a better tight end than any of these other rookie quarterbacks have outside of Mac Jones. I mean, he's got weapons. So you got to put some blame on the quarterback. It's not like he's performing extremely well. I don't want to take up too much more time because I know we got a lot more, but I mean,
I'll transition. Russell Wilson and Kyler Murray will be fine. Hiccup week, it sucks because you probably lost your fantasy matchup not having those points, especially if you drafted Kyler around 4 or 5. I want to speak about Daniel Jones real quick. 16.5 fantasy points after being a top 5 fantasy quarterback the first 2 weeks. He's going up against that terrible Falcons D, and he didn't show up. I didn't play him in a dynasty line, in a DraftKings lineup because I saw this one coming. I saw whenever a player is hyped up, no good. You got to stray away from that. Let's go to the running backs. Running back 1, finally a breakout game. Najee Harris, 28.2 fantasy points. Running back 2, Kareem Hunt, 27.5. James Robinson, running back 3, 25.4. Peyton Barber for the Raiders, 23.2. And Gio Bernard for the Buccaneers at 20.1. Nick, which one of these guys is your biggest stud of the week?
Gio Bernard. I mean, the question was when Gio Bernard signed with this team, is he going to be James White? And he's taking over as James White. 0 rushing attempts, finished with 20 points overall. I mean, the guy finished as a top 10 running back, his first real game with this team. I mean, everybody sees production. That's got to be the takeaway from the week. But, I mean, if you can pick him up in a league, I'm not opposed to it. I think Antonio Brown is going to take away some of those targets because, when he's on the field, he's much better than Scotty Miller, but keep your eye on
The biggest loser with Gio Bernard is those other two running backs that might be droppable. We'll talk about that towards the end of the show, but those other two running backs, no good. For me, I mean, Kareem Hunt, I did project a big game for him, going up against that the Bears. Yeah, I mean that was a given. I want to talk. I mean, Najee, I do want to talk about him for a minute. He had 19 targets. Okay, 19 targets. PPR machine. That's what you need if you drafted him in rounds 1 or 2. If you were frustrated about Najee Harris and you jumped on a trade, like I said, not to, dumb. You're not getting him now. If you traded for Najee Harris, you just struck gold. You stole an Infinity Stone right under somebody's nose. Great get if you did trade for him. Not a lot of carries. I mean, you had 14 for 40 yards. That line isn't great, but if Najee could get like 5 receptions a week, like he's going to be fine. And he didn't even have a touchdown. He had 28 points with no touchdowns. I do want to talk about James Robinson because James Robinson is a guy that you drafted in rounds 3 or 4 as your second running back. He finally showed up. I don't have him here on the fantasy page. I don't know how many he scored the first 2 weeks, but it wasn't great. But I mean, 88 yards, a touchdown. It's 6 receptions. That's huge. That's exactly what he did last year. He was a little bit of both. So this is what you need from James Robinson going forwards. And then the Jags schedule here, if ESPN wants to load. The Bengals, who I spoke about, that's on Thursday night. Tough defense so far, but you never know. Titans, I think he'll have a good game against the Titans, and then we'll see from there. But James Robinson, maybe this is his turning point to get going this season. And the running back duds, Joe Mixon and Myles Gaskin will tie it at running back 27 at 10.4, Nick Chubb at running back 34, 8.4, and Jonathan Taylor running back 35 at 8.2. Jonathan Taylor, what are you doing? I have you on 4 teams. What are you doing? And the Colts, what are you doing? I don't like the Colts at all right now. I want to throw Frank Reich a slap. I want to give Carson Wentz some bionic legs or something because I don't like the Colts right now. And I don't like what they're doing with Jonathan Taylor. He needs more. I need touchdowns. I'm in 4 leagues. You're killing me. He had a solid first week. He had 17 points without the touchdown against Seattle. The second week, I think he had 12 or something. It wasn't great, but this week just, If you drafted Jonathan Taylor round 1 like I did in 4 freaking leagues, you probably lost your week because your first round pick isn't producing for you, and that's a problem. I'm teetering on the fence of worried about Jonathan Taylor. He did have the most carries, which is good. He still did lead the team in carries, but they didn't really carry the ball a lot. 10 carries for Jonathan Taylor, 6 for Nyheim Hines. Marlon Mack did not get anything. And Taylor is averaging, he had 1 long rush of 23, but aside from that, it looks like he's averaging 4 yards a carry, 10 rushes, 64 yards. He's not really getting the receptions. He had 1 reception, 8 yards. He got targeted 3 times. It looks like Hines didn't even get targeted. So I'm wondering what the hell the Colts are doing. Your quarterback is hobbling and you're not using your bell cow? What is wrong with you, Frank Reich? What's wrong with you? I'll put you next to Matt Nagy to keep doing this. Stop. Give Jonathan Taylor more carries. Thank you. That's why you lost the game, because you decided not to run the ball and control the clock, and you let Tractor Cito run up for you 113. Look what Tractor Cito's doing. Look what Derrick Henry's doing, 113 yards. Run the ball, Frank Reich. Nick, your biggest dud of the week with the running backs.
You touched on Jonathan Taylor enough. I was going to talk a little bit about him. I'll say a quick word. I've always said, Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, only 2 running backs on the same team that I'd feel comfortable starting every week. Nyheim Hines is starting to enter that conversation. He's getting a good workload. I think he had 18 points this week, around there. And I had Jonathan Taylor as my running back 1 on the entire year because I thought he was going to get the 3-down work, and I didn't think Nyheim Hines would have that much of a role in the offense. But I was wrong. Look, he has a role.
Hines catches passes. Hines does what Gio Bernard did for the Bengals.
Yeah, exactly. And they're kind of using him in like a Kareem Hunt similar style role. And Jonathan Taylor, he's got me a little concerned with that. I still like his rest of the season outlook. I'm not really taking too much poorly away from, Taylor's performance in this 1 week. But it's definitely something to keep your eye on. Nick Chubb's the guy I want to talk about, and it's because if you drafted Nick Chubb at the end of the first, early second, that this is what he was going to be. He was going to give you weeks like this because Kareem Hunt has a role in this offense. But my bigger question mark is who is number 25 on that Browns team? They got a third running back that they like, and Kevin Stefanski knows how to use him. Stefanski, complete opposite of Matt Nagy. Brilliant play caller, prepared for every game, phenomenal young coach in this league. He's working all three really well. I own Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb in the same league, and it's because I set the goal of playing them each week, hoping that they'd hit around 40 points. They combined for close to that, so I'm happy about it. But that's what you got. That's what you want out of your running backs. If you have the combo of them, you should feel fine because this is what's going to happen a couple weeks. But I mean, you really can't take much away, I think, from Nick Chubb. You expected this knowing when you drafted him.
I do want to mention Quentin Nelson did tweak his ankle a little bit, but they're waiting to see how his ankle responds, but it doesn't seem like anything serious, which is good news for Jonathan Taylor and good news for the Colts. All right, on to wide receivers. Your biggest studs of the week, Mike Williams, the steal of the draft at the moment. Wide receiver 1, 33 points. Devontae Adams finally showed up, 31 points. Cooper Kupp's been maybe he's the biggest steal of the draft at 30.6 points. He's the wide receiver 1 on the season. JaMarr Chase, 22 points. Jalen Waddle, wide receiver 19, 17.8 points. So, Nick, who is your biggest wide receiver stud on the season? Or on this week, I should say. This week. Sorry about that.
I mean, it's a combination of Mike Williams and Cooper Kupp. They're the two wide receiver steals of the draft. But Mike Williams, I'm pissed at myself because I had this outlook for Mike Williams, and I'm looking at his ADP, and I'm like, this guy should be way higher. And I just did not capitalize on it in any of my leagues. And, he's someone I've always been high on for a couple of years now, and I knew if he stays healthy, he's going to have a high production. But the guy has just been phenomenal. They like him on the goal line. They like him deep. They like him short routes. They like him mid routes. They like him deep routes. He's a huge benefactor to Justin Herbert, and the guy's been phenomenal. He's been nothing short of phenomenal. He's a phenomenal football player. You got to like what you see from Mike Williams. Cooper Kupp, this guy is going to finish as a top 5 wide receiver at this rate, maybe wide receiver 1. He's on pace for wide receiver 1. I think he's got close to 100 points through 3 weeks with Matthew Stafford. There's not much more to say about that. And then
Cooper Kupp's doing exactly what I thought Robert Woods would do and why I drafted Robert Woods. I drafted Robert Woods ahead of Amari Cooper, Godwin, Evans, etc. He's doing exactly what I thought, and over Cooper Kupp. He's doing exactly what I thought Robert Woods would do, and that sucks.
Just real quick, just comment on a tweet that Nick here posted. JaMarr Chase, my God, come on!
Can you read my tweet out?
Let me pull it up. You go do your review.
I'll talk about Jalen Waddle first because I want to give a shout out to Matthew Berry's fantasy newsletter that you could sign up for. It's really helpful. Comes out every other day to your email. I was worried about this Dolphins offense. I said not to play any of them, but Jacoby Brissett and Jalen Waddle have something. Waddle led the team in wide receiver snaps at 73, targets 13, and receptions at 12. And a shout out to at DWAIN McFarland on Twitter. Dwayne McFarland on Twitter broke this down. A 33% target share, and Waddle has hardly left the field despite the return of Will Fuller. All underneath stuff with 3.4 ADOT, 90% of snaps, and 89% routes per pass play so far. 52 snaps of data in the fourth quarter. So Waddle's a guy that Jacoby Brissett's going to lean on. So Waddle's a guy you could lock into your flex spots now. JaMarr Chase has been phenomenal. He's been a top 10 fantasy wide receiver. 20 points week 1, 15 week 2, 22 week 3. Burrow loves him. He loves throwing to him in the end zone. Tyler Boyd seems like the odd man out at the moment, but all 3 of those receivers are playable. One of them is going to score 20 plus every single week. One of them is going to score 15, one of them 12. JaMarr Chase, if you have him in Dynasty, you're set, man. You're set for the next 5 to 10 years, and I passed on him. My buddy Tom got him. I chose Kittle. Good stuff. Me and Nick both faded Chase. I'm going to let Nick talk about Chase for a minute.
Yeah, so here's Nick's tweet. Raise your hand if you were dumb enough to believe that JaMarr Chase can't catch rumors and avoided them in fantasy, and I replied to it for also believing that he was under Arden Tate on the depth chart.
Oh, man. All right, Nick, your biggest wide receiver dud. We have Tyreek Hill at 9.7, a second dud week in a row. Cortland Sutton after his monster week, 8.7. Julio Jones, 7.7. Tyler Lockett, 7.1. I knew it was coming, Tyler. Knew it. Robert Woods, 6.8. DeAndre Hopkins, who was banged up at 5.1. And Rondale Moore, breakout candidate, 2.4. Nick, your biggest dud of the week with these wide receivers.
Tyreek Hill, drafted in wide receiver 2. You were hoping the guy would have that consistency that he had last year. It was his question mark 2 years ago.
Especially after 45 points week 1 or whatever he scored.
No, yes. I mean, like I said, he averages 225 yards per game. That's what Tyreek Hill averages against me in fantasy football. The guy's wide receiver 47 on the week. You drafted him wide receiver 2 in every league, if not wide receiver 1. The question mark 2 years ago was, could he be consistent enough to constantly be a wide receiver 1 for your fantasy team? And he answered that question phenomenally. And this year he's been struggling to hold the consistency. I think it's the whole Chiefs offense. There's something a little bit different. It's that Super Bowl hangover.
It's like there's a dark cloud where like they just didn't win the Super Bowl last year. It's like losing a Super Bowl is really, really tough, and it affects a team no matter how good your quarterback is.
Yeah.
Just me. Chiefs will be fine. Chiefs will be in the AFC Championship. Chiefs will be fine. For me, it's Cortland Sutton. Great matchup against the Jets. I think he had like 15 targets last week or something, like 15 receptions maybe. He had a ridiculous stat line last week. This week, only 5 targets. Did catch all 5 of them, only 37 yards, tied for second most targets on the team with Tim Patrick. So I'm not so worried about him. I think he's still the wide receiver 1 there. Bad game script with the Jets being down 26 points, but I think he was a pretty big bust on the week. Not worried about Hopkins. He was banged up. Rondale Moore will be fine. They spread the ball around. Robert Woods, I'm a little worried about, but that offense likes to score. So again, not worried about him either. Tight ends. Tight end 1, Travis Kelce has finally reclaimed his throne, 20 points. Jake Conklin, is that his first name? I think Jack. 20 points for the Minnesota Vikings against my Seattle Seahawks. Mark Andrews, tight end, 3, 18 points. Mike Gesicki, who was dropped after week 1 with a goose egg, 14.6. Tyler Higbee, one of our breakout tight ends for the year at tight end 6. So Nick, 15 points for Higbee. Who is your biggest tight end breakout for the year? For the week. I keep saying year for some reason.
We all know how high I was on Higbee. I'm still high on him, but the guy you got to talk about is Mike Gesicki. Jacoby Brissett behind there, he got double-digit targets. I mean, not a lot of tight ends in football are going to get that, and it's a crowded offense. I mean, he found a way to be productive. Keep your eye on him. I mean, if you're thin at tight end, you might want to look at picking him back up. I'm sure I can tell you I didn't draft him in any leagues, but I watched him get dropped in 5 out of my 6. Like, the guy is there. And keep your eye out for him. If he's going to keep getting double-digit targets, I mean, you're not going to get that at him. Outside the top 3, you're really not going to see that. So keep your eye on Gesicki.
I was actually wrong. It's Tyler Conklin. Tyler Conklin got 8 targets, caught 7 of them, 70 yards and a touchdown. There's a lot of amounts to feed on that Vikings offense. But, I mean, he's getting 4 targets a game at least, which isn't bad. I mean, the first week it was 4 targets, 4 receptions for 41 yards. Second week, 2 receptions for 2 receptions on 4 targets for 15 yards. I think he's a guy you should look at. Keep him close. He'll be a waiver target next week if he has another good week, but keep Tyler Conklin close when it comes to that. And the duds, Kyle Pitts seems to be a recurring name on this list. 5.5 points. Noah Fant, 3.5. TJ Hawkinson, the big one, with 3 points, and Robert Tonyan with 1.6. Who's your biggest dud of the week with the tight ends?
I'm not going to take too much from Hawkinson. He's had so much workload where, the one-off week I'm not worried about. My guy's Kyle Pitts. I mean, we could do this another segment on another show where you have your takeaways from early weeks. Kyle Pitts is not that guy. I mean, he's not going to finish as that top 5 tight end where you drafted him. I mean, Hawkinson should outperform him. Kelce, Andrews, Waller, they're all practically guaranteed. Andrews is debatable. Higbee's debatable. If Gesicki sees double-digit targets, he's debatable. Noah Fant has become debatable. Like, the guy, we thought he was locked in with Julio not there to with the 4th overall pick to have production. He's just not going to be that guy, I don't think.
But I don't think he's the problem. I think Matt Ryan and that offense is the problem. The Falcons are turning into another team where I'm like, I don't want to play these guys. I just don't want to play any of them in fantasy because they're
just
abysmal. The Falcons are abysmal.
Yeah, just real quick. I mean, look, it's Arthur Smith. He figured out a way to move the ball to big receivers when he had the big running back and Derrick Henry to open up the field. And they're just not doing it without a big target on the outside.
Nope.
All those guys are seeing a downtick.
Nope.
In my opinion.
Yep. Alrighty, we're going to move on to the waiver wire. Hopefully you get some of these waiver targets that you need to help boost your team. Number one, and my number one, at least we might as well read off the names here. Chuba Hubbard, backup for Christian McCaffrey. He's owned in 11.3% of leagues. Last week he had 10.9 points after McCaffrey went out. He averaged 4.7 yards a carry, also had 3 receptions. Other names here, Emmanuel Sanders. He's owned in 23% of leagues. He had 26 fantasy points. Christian Kirk owned in 22% of leagues, had 17 fantasy points. Zach Moss, he led in carries, 57% of leagues. He's owned. He had 18 fantasy points. Hunter Renfrow is owned in 11.3% of fantasy leagues, but he's averaging 6 targets a game. He had 18 fantasy points. Kendrick Bourne, he's owned in 0.4% of the league, had 8 targets for the Patriots. He had 21 fantasy points. Peyton Barber is owned in 11.3% of leagues, had 23 fantasy points, 23 carries, 111 yards. And then Tim Patrick, he's owned in 14% of fantasy leagues. We recommended him, I think, after week 1, after Judy went out. He had 14 fantasy points. Caught all 5 of his targets, 98 yards. Wide receiver 30 on the season, 12 plus points in all of his games. Nick, let me ask you, who are your top 2 or 3 waiver wire targets? I'm guessing Chuba Hubbard's your number 1, so if he's your 1, just give me 2 more.
Yep, Hubbard's locked in at the 1. I would go Tim Patrick, number 2, should have already been picked up. And number 3, I'm looking at Kendrick Bourne. We know they cycle those receivers, but with 8 targets, I like the production. I like the outlook for him. He's someone I feel confident stashing.
I like your picks. I like Patrick as a number 2. I'm going to say Peyton Barber. I mean, they clearly used him in that Josh Jacobs role, and Jacobs, he only plays probably 12, 11 games a year. And if Peyton Barber is going to be the guy that slots in, not Kenyon Drake, that's a running back. If you have Christian McCaffrey and Chuba Hubbard's owned, which he probably is, Peyton Barber's probably not. You probably need a running back, so pick up Peyton Barber if you can. If not, and Zach Moss isn't owned in your league, I think it's time that he gets owned in. He's at 57 right now. Probably should be up to 100. At least 80 in most of those leagues. Some of these other guys, I mean, Hunter Renfrow's another guy I think should be owned. The Raiders offense, they're going to air it out. I think Hunter Renfrow's another one, like 11.3% of leagues. That's a crime. Christian Kirk and Emmanuel Sanders, if you do have a deeper league, if you have 10 people on your bench, which we do in our leagues, I think those are guys too that need to be owned. Emmanuel Sanders got picked up by Jake, I think, Sunday morning, and then Christian Kirk is owned too. Those are offenses that are going to spread the ball around. You want to have one of those guys. You don't really know what you're going to get from a Sanders or a Kirk, but you play them that 1 week, they're going to boom for 20 points. Those are also guys that you should be targeting. So I think me and Nick's top 5 roughly is Chuba Hubbard, Tim Patrick, Peyton Barber, Kendrick Bourne, and Hunter Renfrow. So hopefully you get one of those guys on your waivers this week. But to pick up guys, you got to drop some guys. So Nick, let's talk about stash or trash. I'll give Nick a guy and I'll give my opinion too. And we'll tell you if this is the guy that we're willing to stash or trash for the rest of the season. Let's kick things off with Patriots tight ends. Either it's Jonnu Smith or Hunter Henry. Nick, are you stashing one of these guys or are they getting dropped?
I have Jonnu Smith. I'm looking to pick up Mike Gesicki in his place, so I'm dropping him.
I'm with you right there. I'm dropping both of them. I don't think either of them should be owned in any leagues at the moment. Elijah Moore on the Jets, the wide receiver 3, is currently concussed at the moment. And this is for standard leagues, by the way, not dynasty. So, Nick, are you keeping Elijah Moore?
In a keeper league, I think you have to. If you take a look at the advanced stats, Elijah Moore is averaging 4.5 yards of separation on average. The drops have just become the issue. The league average is about 2.5 or 2.8. So, the guy's been pretty good. He's just dropping the ball. I think once the O-line gets a little bit healthier with Becton and matchups get easier, we'll see more production. So I'm going to still stash him for now.
How about AJ Dillon on the Packers?
I'm dropping him. I don't think, unless if you have him as the handcuff, Dillon's not going to see the Jamal Williams type role in this offense with Jones playing that well.
They've decided to finally free Aaron Jones. The shackles are off. If you did draft Aaron Jones, you're reaping the benefits. I'm only keeping AJ Dillon if I have Aaron Jones for a similar situation like Christian McCaffrey. What about Darnell Mooney?
I've been saying it all year. Trash him. Nope.
I'm stashing him. He's too good. Too much talent. The Bears hopefully will figure some kind of offense out at some point. He's not playable. He's not playable until you have 2 or 3 games where you could trust him, but you stash him. What about Mecole Hardman on the Chiefs?
I'm going to hold him until I see what Josh Gordon's role in this offense is. If he takes over as the wide receiver 2 and Sammy Watkins plays, I'm dropping him.
Chiefs never use a third wide receiver. I'm dropping him. Look at Kendrick Bourne, Hunter Renfrow, Christian Kirk. I'm looking at guys with upside. I don't see it with Hardman. I can't trust playing him. I'm trashing him. Robbie Anderson on the Panthers. I think he's third in target share at the moment among the wide receivers. But he still has the deep bomb.
Right now, he's under DJ Moore, Terrence Marshall, and Christian McCaffrey in targets, and Chuba Hubbard will probably out-target him over the next 2 games.
Yeah, so are you trashing Robbie Anderson, or is he just hitting the bench?
I think you have to hold him because they're paying him too much money where they have a role in this offense for him. I just don't think that they've defined it yet with Sam Darnold. I think that it'll start to become more defined halfway through the season, so I'm not trashing him yet. But, there's definitely calls for concern. I benched him this week, and I probably will bench him until he gets more of that defined role.
For me, if you have Robbie Anderson in a league with only 6 people on your bench and your roster is probably 2 running back, 2 wide receiver, 1 flex, I'm trashing him because I think there's better guys out there. But that's if you have a 6-person bench, which most leagues don't. If you have a 10-man bench, I think you got to keep him at the end of your bench and just hopefully see that you get some production from Robbie Anderson. Next up, we have Nelson Agholor on the Patriots. Hot waiver wire pickup after week 1, but he's cooled off. Nick, stash or trash on Agholor?
Trash him. They're rotating those wide receivers. I don't think there'll be a week where you'll feel comfortable locking in Agholor without a Kendrick Bourne or Jacoby Myers injury. And you're really not banking on a guy with upside for that. So I'm trashing him.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. I think he's trash. You don't need Agholor. These Patriots wide receivers are very tricky to figure out. That's why I'm not all in on Kendrick Bourne yet. Agholor's the type of guys you picked up off the waiver wire, see what happens, then you trash him. That's just how the waiver wire goes. You cycle it out. So there you go. How about the Buccaneers running backs, playoff Lenny or Rojo?
I think that you should. Where you drafted them, you probably have to roster them because running back is thin, and they are, on given weeks they'll be the running back 1. But Gio Bernard's the guy that I want to stash out of any of the 3.
For me, I'm trashing Rojo. I just don't see the value there. If you got to keep one of them, keep Leonard Fournette, but you should have 3 or 4 running backs there with more value than either of them. You're never going to want to play one of them unless both of your starters are out. And again, Peyton Barber, Zach Moss have more value. So if they're on your, or even Gio Bernard should be on your waiver wire. If you desperately want a running back, I would go with one of those 3. How about Ravens running backs? Tyson Williams. They have like 5 of them now. Le'Veon Bell, Latavius Murray, any of those guys that you want to keep on your bench at the moment.
Tyson Williams is the only one. My heartbreaking moment was picking up Latavius Murray this past week in place of Chuba Hubbard. And Hubbard was my handcuff for McCaffrey. God forbid there was the injury. And it's heartbreaking, but it is what it is. I'm trashing all of them outside of Williams.
I'm with you on that one. Tyson Williams is stashable, but not playable at the moment. How about Michael Gallup dealing with an injury? I think he's still out like 2 or 3 weeks. Are you trashing him just to get one of these other guys?
I don't think so. I think he has a much more defined role in the offense, so I'm going to keep him stashed. And, it's more talented quarterback than most of the guys that we listed. So you got to keep him, in my opinion. I'm
trashing him for Tim Patrick or Hunter Renfrow, maybe even Sanders or Kirk. I think all those guys have more upside than
I think
Michael Gallup.
Patrick would, out of all of them that you listed, Patrick would be the only one I'd take over him. The rest of them I'd still keep Gallup.
All right. Last one. He's been on Stash or Trash for the last 2 weeks, and he's going to keep being here until we could figure him out. Marquez Callaway on the Saints. Stash or Trash, Nick?
Stash him. He's improved in all 3 weeks, and the Patriots defense isn't an easy one. It really comes down to how well Winston performs. And by the time Michael Thomas comes back, I think he fades tremendously, but I think you got to keep him for now, and he has a good role. You might want to flex him depending on your matchups.
He led the team in targets at 5, caught 4 of them, 40 yards, had a really ridiculous touchdown, but hey, it was a jump ball. He made the catch. Jameis threw a ridiculous throw, a Jameis-like throw, and he made the catch. So I'll stash him. I'm not playing him, but I think he's a stash. There you go. There's your stash or trash. There's your waiver wire. Hopefully we helped you guys out, tell you who to drop, who to pick up, and hopefully we helped you with this show. The next time you hear from us is on Friday. Cody will be joining us. and that'll be great because our Friday shows are a lot of fun. So you can listen if you enjoyed the show and you're a first time listener, thank you. Please let us know that you enjoyed it or didn't enjoy it, or what we can improve on. The audio for us, you could find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, anywhere that has podcast audio. If you are on Apple, please give us a rating, 5-star rating and a review. It does mean a lot to us. And aside from that, on YouTube, if you want to watch us, we are on YouTube, Primetime Fantasy Podcast. We're on social media, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. For 3 of those is PrimeTimeFFPod. And then for the Facebook, Primetime Fantasy Podcast. Remember, our next show is Friday, the next time you hear from us. And the live show is Sunday, 11 a.m. Eastern Time, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. Nick, anything you'd like to say before we get out of here?
Thank you to everybody that showed up Sunday. Thank you for everybody that's watching today. Make sure you come every Sunday. We got some nice calls, and I want to give a quick shout out to one of mine. Said Odell Beckham's line is Tyler Boyd. Beat out Tyler Boyd by 0.1 points. That was my line for him. I'm hype about it.
There you go. I wish I had played him, but hey, OBJ looked good. Something we should have talked about, but OBJ did look good. You can follow me on Twitter at @TheNickGiacobi. And again, if you do watch our show live on Twitter, we're going to fix the question thing. We're going to figure it out. So again, apologies if we didn't get to your question. Thank you guys. See you on Friday, week 4. Let's get it.